With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "They said I'm worthless because I'm deaf." Instead of words, she received a smile and symbols traced in the earth. Subscribe to the channel and follow how silence can transform into the most powerful language of love and acceptance. Kiara never knew the sound of wind rustling through cassava leaves. Since birth, her world consisted only of silences and shapes. She lived in a simple mud house on the outskirts of Ilhea's southern Bahia, where shouting had become as common as the midday heat, but couldn't hurt her like it hurt others, because she couldn't hear them. For this very reason, she was seen as a burden, divine punishment, a flaw that embarrassed the Mendonça family, known in the region for their cocoa production. She never had a name that lasted more than one season. They called her Crippled Ears, Punishment, or Problem. She was never enrolled in the municipal school, never received a notebook. She spent her days observing lip movements, trying to decipher what they said about her, and avoiding looks of pity or contempt. She was 12 years old and knew only the weight of her father's heavy hands when she made mistakes or dropped something. Silence for Yara was both a prison and a refuge. That January morning, with the sun punishing the plantation parched by drought, it happened again. Her mother, Donna Severina, yelled when the girl dropped the basin of peeled cassava. The slap came next, stinging, leaving finger marks on her thin face. The slap didn't hurt as much as the shame. Donna Severina shouted words Yara couldn't hear, but she saw on her mother's thin lips the same expressions as always: useless, burden, disgrace. She looked at her dirt-covered hands and felt something break inside her. It wasn't the first time, nor would it be the last, but that day, something changed. She ran out, crossed the yard full of chickens that scattered in fright, jumped over the already rotting wooden fence, and plunged into the trail leading to the forest. She ran until her chest burned, until her bare feet bled from the thorns and stones along the way. She followed the course of the Cachoeira River, which snaked between properties, past the farm's boundaries, reached the border with lands that everyone in the region called Indian territory. She only stopped when she had no more breath, with her dress torn and her face stained with dust, sweat, and tear marks that dried quickly in the heat. That's when she saw him, sitting on a smooth stone by the river. A man with skin darkened by the sun and wrinkled hands worked with precise movements on something that looked like a small wooden sculpture. He wore no shirt, just faded cotton pants, and had paintings on his chest that Yara had never seen before. His long graying hair was tied with a leather strip. He was a pataxo, the same people her father called savages and land thieves. Yara felt her body freeze. The stories she heard about the indigenous people were always terrifying. She considered turning back, but the memory of the slap kept her firm. The man raised his eyes. They were calm eyes, deep like the river waters in flood season. He showed no surprise or anger at seeing her. He asked no questions. He simply returned to work on the sculpture. Several minutes passed. Silence for Yara had always been normal, but this silence was different. It wasn't oppressive or frightening. It was peaceful, like a conversation without words. The man finished the small sculpture, a bird with open wings, and extended it to her. Yara hesitated but eventually approached. She took the wooden bird, feeling its smooth texture under her fingers. The man then took a twig and began to draw in the damp earth of the riverbank. A sun, a tree, a fish. Simple gestures, but they spoke more than words. Yara watched, confused at first, then intrigued. She crouched down and, with another twig, drew a circle with a dot in the middle. The man smiled. It was the first genuine smile anyone had directed at her in a long time. In the days that followed, Yara returned to the same place. She would escape from home before dawn and return only when the sun was already setting. At the farm, they barely noticed her absence, or pretended not to notice. The man whom she discovered was named Jurasi, was always there with river shells, colored seeds, bird feathers, and pieces of wood. With these simple elements, they created their own language, a mixture of gestures, drawings, and expressions. Jurasi knew sign language. He had a granddaughter who also couldn't hear, he explained through drawings. He showed Yara how to form words with her fingers, how to express feelings without sounds. For the first time, Yara discovered she could communicate what she felt, and, more importantly, that she could be understood. One afternoon, while they were drawing together in the sand by the river, Yara risked forming with her hands clumsily. The signs Jurasi had taught her, They say I'm worthless because I can't hear." Jurasi became serious. He touched his own chest and then hers. He drew in the sand a circle with spirals coming out of it, like waves. Then he took a radioricum seed and planted it in the center of the drawing. There were no spoken words. But Yara understood. You have something inside you that they still can't see. Gradually, Yara began to change. She no longer walked looking at the ground. She no longer hid herself. She learned to make necklaces with seeds, to weave straw for baskets, to observe animal movements, the swaying of leaves as signs of the weather. Jurasi taught with patience, with respect, with the wisdom of someone who also knew the weight of prejudice. One morning, when she arrived at the meeting place, Yara found a woman with Jurasi. It was Donna Zifa, the region's midwife, known for her knowledge of herbs and prayers. Tall black, with a colorful turban on her head and beaded necklaces around her neck. Donna Zifa, unlike all the adults Yara knew, didn't look at her with pity or contempt. She watched attentively when Jurasi showed how they communicated and, surprisingly, tried to imitate the gestures. Donna Zifa learned quickly. Her hands, calloused from decades of helping children come into the world, now formed signs that gave new meaning to silence. "This girl has her own light," she said to Jurasi, while Yara watched them attentively. "But in the Mendonça house, they want to extinguish that light." Jurasi nodded gravely. Donna Zifa's presence changed something in the balance of those days. She brought news from the world beyond the river, stories from the village, from the farms. She told that Yara's parents had asked about her, not out of concern, but out of shame that their defective daughter was hanging around with Indians. Time was running out. In a week, there would be the São João festival in the village, and Yara's father, Mr. Jeremias, had sworn that before then, his daughter would be back, even if tied up. The news fell like a stone in Yara's stomach. For the first time in months, she felt real fear. She didn't want to go back. She couldn't go back. There, with Jurasi, she existed. She was seen. In her parents' house, she was just a shadow, a mistake, a shame hidden from visitors. Jurasi noticed the change in her. That afternoon, he took her deeper into the forest, where the trees became denser and the ground moister. They walked to a small clearing where there was a simple hut covered with straw. That's where he lived alone, since most of his tribe had moved south, pressured by farmers who encroached on their lands. He showed Yara how to make fire, how to weave fibers to make ropes, how to recognize medicinal and poisonous plants. And then, in a gesture she didn't expect, he offered her a necklace. It was simple, made of red seeds and small teeth that she didn't recognize. Jurasi explained, with gestures and drawings, that the necklace had belonged to his daughter, the mother of his deaf granddaughter. She had departed many years ago. Sayatra understood that depart meant to die, but Jurasi never used that word. For him, people didn't die. They just went on to another journey. The necklace was more than a gift. It was a symbol of belonging, of acceptance. By placing it around Yara's neck, Jurasi was recognizing her as part of his family. A family that didn't see her as a defect, but as a complete being. The week passed too quickly. Each day, Yara learned more signs, more ways to communicate. Jurasi taught her to use her whole body as expression. The shoulders, the eyes, the eyebrows, everything spoke. And when words weren't enough, there were drawings, objects, touches. A new language was born between them, a mixture of the sign language Jurasi knew with the unique gestures they created. Donna Zifa came almost every day, sometimes bringing fruits or bread. She served as a bridge between worlds. She told about the village, about how people commented that the mute girl of the Mendonças was hanging around with the old Indian. There was concern, gossip, and even fear. "They say you're bewitched," Donna Zifa told her, making the sign they had created for lie. Yara smiled. If there was any spell, it was that of understanding, respect, recognition. On the eve of the São João festival, when the first bonfires were already being set up in the village, Donna Zifa arrived breathless at the clearing. "They're coming tomorrow," she signaled with trembling hands. Mr. Jeremias, the sheriff, and 2 more men. "They're coming to get you, Yara. They say this old Indian kidnapped you." Yara felt her stomach sink. It wasn't true. She had chosen to be there, chosen to learn, chosen to finally live. Jurasi remained calm as always. He sat on the clearing floor and began to draw in the earth. He made the outline of a large tree, then drew a nest with chicks at the top. Next, he drew a snake climbing up the trunk, threatening the nest. Finally, he drew an adult bird, wings spread facing the snake. He looked at Yara and pointed to the adult bird. It was time to choose. Time to defend her nest. That night, as stars appeared in the clear June sky, Yara, Jurasi, and Donna Zephyr prepared the clearing. Not for a war, Jurasi didn't believe in violence, but for a meeting. A moment of truth. They arranged the objects they had created together. The seed necklaces, the wooden sculptures, the drawings made on pieces of tree bark. They set up a small altar with a fire in the center. Jurasi painted Yara's face and arms with urukum and genipapo, designs that told her story. From invisible girl to complete person, from shadow to presence, Donna Zephyr brought herbs to burn in the fire. To open the eyes of those who don't want to see, she explained. The San Juan morning dawned with a clear sky and dry air. The smell of smoke from the bonfires that had burned during the night still hung in the air. Yara woke before the sun, her heart beating like a hummingbird's wing. She knew that day would change everything, forever. She put on the tunic Jurasi had made for her, of buriti fiber dyed red. She placed the seed necklace around her neck. She painted the symbols on her arms again, as Jurasi had taught her. And she waited. The sun was already high when they heard branches breaking under heavy boots. First appeared Sheriff Raimundo, sweating in his worn beige uniform, the revolver visible in its holster. Then Mr. Jeremias, Yara's father, with his face red from anger or cachaça, probably both. Next, 2 more men from the village whom Yara knew by sight. Lastly, surprisingly, came Donna Severina, Yara's mother, eyes downcast, hands nervously clutching her rosary. They all stopped at the edge of the clearing, surprised by the scene they found. It wasn't what they expected, a frightened girl being forcibly kept by an old indigenous man. Instead, they saw Yara standing, painted and adorned like a Pataxo warrior, beside Jurasi and Donna Zephyr, the 3 forming a semicircle around the still burning fire. "What nonsense is this?" Mr. Jeremias vociferated, advancing a step. The sheriff placed a hand on his shoulder, restraining him. "Calm down, Jeremias. Let's understand what's happening here." Mr. Jeremias spat on the ground. "What is there to understand? This old Indian stole my daughter, and this crazy healer is helping. That's a crime." Donna Zephyr stepped forward. Her presence was imposing, and even the sheriff seemed to shrink a little. "Nobody stole anyone, Jeremias. The girl came of her own will. She fled from the slaps and contempt. Or will you deny that you treated your own daughter like an animal, like a shame?" Mr. Jeremias turned red with rage. "The education of my children is my problem. And this one," he pointed to Yara with contempt, "doesn't even learn. She's deaf. She's good for nothing." That's when Yara stepped forward and began to move her hands. Fluid, precise gestures laden with emotion. Her face expressed every feeling, every unspoken word. No one in the clearing except Jurasi and Donna Zephyr understood what she was saying. But everyone felt the power of that communication. Donna Zephyr began to translate. "She says you never tried to understand her, never really looked at her. You called her defective divine punishment, but here she learned that her silence is not an absence. It's just a different way of being in the world." Sheriff Raimundo observed with curiosity, those hands dancing in the air. He had never seen anything like it. The other men exchanged suspicious glances, but something in Yara's dignity kept them silent. Donna Severina stepped forward, eyes fixed on the daughter she barely recognized. She was no longer the frightened girl who hid in corners. There was a strength in her, a presence that she had never noticed before. Yara continued signaling, and Donna Zephyr translating. "For 12 years, I lived as a shadow in your house. No one bothered to give me a name that wasn't problem or punishment. No one tried to teach me, to understand me. Here I learned that I can speak, that I can be heard even in silence." Mr. Jeremias interrupted, his voice laden with scorn. "This is witchcraft. These people bewitched her mind. Let's end this now." He advanced toward Yara, but the sheriff restrained him again. "Wait, Jeremias. Let the girl finish." The father snorted but stepped back. Yara continued her silent communication, the gestures increasingly assertive. Donna Zephyr translated with a choked voice. "It's not a spell. It's respect. For the first time, someone saw me as a complete person, not as a defect. Juracy taught me the language of hands. He taught me that my silence is just a different way of listening to the world. Donna Severina began to cry silently. Perhaps for the first time she really saw her daughter. Not the deaf girl, not the problem, but Iara, a whole person, capable, strong. Juracy remained silent as always. His serene eyes observed the scene as if he had seen it many times before. The time of choices had come. Sheriff Raimundo scratched his head, visibly uncomfortable. "Look, Jeremias, I don't see any crime here. The girl doesn't seem to be kept against her will. And this hand language seems important to her." One of the men who accompanied them, Mr. Tonico, owner of the village store, commented, "I have a nephew in Salvador who is like this too, born deaf. His sister told me there's a special school for these children over there." Mr. Jeremias didn't want to know about special schools or sign language. He wanted his authority respected. "She's my daughter, a minor. She's coming home right now." He advanced again, this time managing to escape the sheriff. He grabbed Yara's arm forcefully, trying to drag her. That's when Juracy finally moved. He didn't speak, didn't shout. He simply interposed himself between Yara and her father with the serene dignity of his 70 years. His eyes met those of Mr. Jeremias, and what the farmer saw in them made him retreat. It wasn't threat or anger. It was a quiet certainty, an ancient strength that came from long before fences and deeds. The sheriff took the opportunity to intervene again. "Enough, Jeremias. I won't allow violence here. Let's talk like civilized people." "Civilized?" Jeremias spat the words. "With an Indian and a deaf girl? What do they know about civilization?" Donna Zephyr stepped forward, her voice sharp as a hunting knife. "They know enough to treat a child with dignity. What does it say about your civilization that a girl needs to flee from her own family to find respect?" The blow hit home. Mr. Jeremias turned red with anger, but also with shame. The other men looked at the ground uncomfortable. Donna Severina continued crying, now softly sobbing. Yara, with decisive gestures, drew a dividing line in the earth. On one side, she placed a handful of black seeds, on the other red seeds. Then she took a river shell and placed it on the side of the red seeds. Everyone understood the meaning, even without translations. She was choosing her side, her place. Mr. Jeremias snorted, "This is ridiculous." "She's not old enough to decide anything." "Sheriff, do your job." Sheriff Raimundo sighed deeply. After a few moments of reflection, he spoke in a measured voice. "According to the law, the girl should return to her parents' house, but—" He made a significant pause. "There's also a law against child mistreatment. And from what I'm seeing and hearing here, this girl wasn't well treated in your house, Jeremias." Mr. Jeremias began to protest, but the sheriff raised his hand, interrupting him. "I have a proposal. The São João festival will last 3 days in the village. Let's use that time. The girl stays here with Mr. Juracy and Donna Zephyr. You, Jeremias and Severina, will visit your daughter every day. You'll observe how she communicates, how she lives. At the end of the 3 days, we'll talk again." Mr. Jeremias seemed about to explode, but Donna Severina placed her hand on his arm. "Please, Jeremias, let us try." There was something different in her voice, a decision, a new courage. Perhaps seeing her daughter standing, strong, communicating with such clarity, had broken something inside her too. The farmer looked at his wife, then at his daughter, and finally at the sheriff. 3 days, he said at last through clenched teeth. "But if these people do anything to her—" "They won't," the sheriff assured. "From what I'm seeing, they already have. They've taught her to communicate, more than we managed in all these years." When the visitors left, with the promise to return the next day, Yara felt her legs weaken. She sat by the fire, trembling. She had confronted her father. She had made a choice. She had for the first time spoken and been heard. Juracy sat beside her, and in silence placed his hand over hers. Donna Zephyr was exultant. "Did you see their faces? Especially when you started using sign language. They never imagined you could communicate like this." Yara smiled weakly. She was exhausted but satisfied. The first step had been taken. The hardest was yet to come. The 3 days of the São João festival were the most intense in Yara's life. In the morning, Juracy would take her fishing in the river, showing her how to observe the movement of fish, how to cast the net at the exact moment. Then they would study together the plants of the forest, their properties, their uses. In the afternoon, when the sun was no longer so punishing, they would receive visitors. On the first day, Donna Severina and Mr. Tonico, the store owner, came. The farmer had refused to appear. The mother arrived timid, uncomfortable, but gradually loosened up. She observed, fascinated, how Yara and Jurasi communicated, how Donna Zefa could already understand and reproduce many of the signs. Mr. Tonico, surprisingly, showed great interest. "My nephew in Salvador uses something similar," he commented. "But I've never seen up close how it works." On the second day, more people from the village appeared. The sheriff brought his wife and daughter. Father Joachim, curious about that hand language, came too. Even some children from the village appeared, brought by curious parents. All wanted to see the girl who spoke with her hands. Jurasi, patient as always, helped Yara show the basic signs. How to say hello, thank you, or please, the children learned easily, laughing and trying to imitate the gestures. The third day, eve of the end of the festival, brought the biggest surprise. Mr. Jeremias appeared, alone without the sheriff, without his wife. He arrived late in the afternoon when the sun was already beginning to set, painting the sky orange and red. He found Yara sitting by the river, weaving a straw basket as Jurasi had taught her. He stood observing her for a few minutes before making his presence known. When Yara saw him, her eyes widened in surprise. Then they assumed a cautious, defensive expression. Mr. Jeremias sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. For the first time in his life, he really looked at his daughter. He saw the skillful hands weaving the straw with precision. He saw the concentrated face, the attentive eyes. He saw not a defective person, but a person. Someone capable, intelligent, complete. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. How to communicate with someone he had never tried to understand before? Chiara observed him waiting. Finally, Mr. Jeremias did the only thing he could think of. He took a twig and began to draw in the sand, as he had seen Jurasi do. He drew a house. Then, next to it, he drew what appeared to be a small person. He pointed to the drawing and then to Yara. He was asking if she wanted to return home. Yara looked at the drawing, then at her father. There were 1,000 possible answers at that moment. She could shake her head no. She could angrily erase the drawing. She could get up and leave. But what she did surprised them both. She took another twig, and next to the house her father had drawn added another construction, a hut like Jurasi's. Then she drew a line connecting the two dwellings. And finally, she drew several small human figures on both sides of the line. Mr. Jeremias frowned, trying to understand. Jaja pointed to the figures, then to herself, and made a pendular movement with her hand. She wanted to be able to move between the two worlds. Not to choose one at the expense of the other, but to create a bridge. Mr. Jeremias remained silent for long minutes. His daughter's proposal was unexpected. It wasn't submission as he had hoped, nor rejection as he had feared. It was an invitation to something new, something he had never considered before. Finally, he nodded slowly. It wasn't an enthusiastic yes, but it was a beginning. Jurasi observed the scene from afar, his serene eyes capturing the subtle transformation that was beginning to happen. That night, the last of the São João festival, something different happened in the village of Cachoeira do Mato. In the center of the square, where the main bonfire burned high, illuminating the faces of people who danced and celebrated, a space was opened. Father Joachim asked for silence, and to everyone's surprise invited Jurasi, Donna Zefa, and Yara to the center of the circle. There were murmurs, suspicious looks, but also curiosity. Sheriff Raimundo and his family were the first to approach, followed by Mr. Tonico and other merchants. Finally, Mr. Jeremias and Donna Severina also joined the group, uncomfortable but present. The priest spoke in a solemn voice. "This festival celebrates St. John, the one who prepared the way. And today I think we're all learning about new paths, about hearing those who don't speak like us but have much to say." There was a respectful silence. Then Jurasi made a sign to Yara. It was time. The girl stepped forward, her heart beating fast. She began to move her hands, forming the signs she had learned in the past weeks. Donna Zefa beside her translated aloud, "My name is Yara. For 12 years I lived in silence, not because I chose to, but because I was born this way. You called me defective, a problem. But Jurasi taught me that I am not incomplete. I just hear the world in a different way. People watched, fascinated. Those hands that danced in the air, telling stories without sound. Kiara continued, and Donna Zephyr kept translating. I learned that I can speak with my hands, that I can be heard with the eyes, that I can belong without having to change who I am. A child escaped from her mother's arms and ran to Iara. It was Maria Xenia, the 5-year-old daughter of the baker. She looked at Iara's hands with eyes wide with curiosity and tried to imitate one of the gestures. Iara smiled, and, patient as Jurasi had been with her, showed the girl how to form the word friend with her hands. Maria Xenia repeated the gesture, laughing with joy when Iara nodded, approving. Soon other children approached, wanting to learn too. The adults observed, some with tears in their eyes, others with hesitant smiles, still others with incredulous expressions. But all saw, perhaps for the first time, that this girl they had always considered defective had something valuable to teach. Father Joachim approached Jurasi and, with respect, extended his hand. Thank you for teaching us to truly listen. The old Pataxo nodded, his eyes shining in the bonfire light. Mr. Jeremias observed his daughter, now surrounded by curious children, teaching simple signs with patience and joy. Something ached inside him, shame for the lost time, for the years of contempt. But there was also another feeling, new and fragile as a sprout, pride. The morning after the end of the festival, Sheriff Raimundo gathered everyone again in the clearing by Jurasi's hut. It was time for a decision. Mr. Jeremias and Donna Severina were present, as were Donna Zephyr, Father Joachim, and several other people from the village who had become interested in the case. Iara stood next to Jurasi, wearing a new tunic that Donna Zephyr had made for her, decorated with seeds and shells. Well, as we agreed, 3 days have passed, the sheriff began. Now we need to decide where the girl will stay. Before anyone could speak, Iara began to signal. Donna Zephyr translated, I don't want to choose between my blood family and my chosen family. I want to build a bridge between these two worlds. Mr. Jeremias stepped forward. His voice, usually loud and domineering, was strangely soft. I failed my daughter all these years. I didn't know how to deal with her, didn't try to understand her. I only saw what was missing, not what she had to offer. He paused, visibly moved. If she wants to return home, the doors are open. But I understand if she prefers to stay here, where she was treated with the respect she didn't receive from us. Donna Severina sobbed softly. They were her first words directed at her daughter in years. Forgive us. Iara. The name came with difficulty from her lips, as if only now was she truly naming her. Jurasi, who had remained silent, finally spoke. His voice was deep with a strong accent but clear. The girl doesn't need to choose. She can have both worlds. Spend days here, days there. Learn from all of us. It was the first time many there had heard the old Pataxo speak. They were surprised to discover that he could, but chose not to do so most of the time. And more importantly, continued Jurasi, the hand language I taught her cannot die. It needs to grow, to spread. Other children like her need to know they are not alone. Father Joachim, who had listened attentively, proposed, what if we used the room at the back of the church for classes? Kiara could teach the hand language to anyone who wanted to learn, including her parents. Mr. Tonico added, I can write to my sister in Salvador. She said there are books about this language there. We can bring them to the village. The idea grew quickly. In no time it was decided. Yara would divide her time between her parents' house and Jurasi's hut. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, she would give sign language classes in the church room. Sheriff Raimundo promised to write to the authorities in Salvador, seeking information about schools for the deaf and educational materials. The first students were already guaranteed, the village children, fascinated with the new form of communication, and some curious adults, including Donna Severina, determined to finally learn to talk with her daughter. That same afternoon, as the sun began to set over the Cachoeira River, Yara sat with Jurasi by the water. She took a twig and drew in the sand, a circle from which lines emerged like sun rays. In the center of the circle, she planted a red seed. It was the same drawing that Jurasi had made for her weeks before. The old Pataxo smiled. He perfectly understood what she wanted to say. The seed had sprouted. 3 months later, the room at the back of the church could no longer accommodate all those interested in sign language classes. They had to move to the main hall. Iara, now 13, had transformed. She walked with confidence through the village streets, greeting everyone with her graceful gestures. Many could already respond with basic signs. Good morning, how are you? Thank you. Jurassi's presence had also become common in the village. The old Pataxo came 3 times a week, bringing his tranquil wisdom and his knowledge about forest plants. He began to work with Dona Zephyr, combining Pataxo medicinal herbs with prayers and blessings from the Afro-Brazilian tradition. Sheriff Raimundo had kept his promise. Books about Brazilian Sign Language arrived from Salvador, along with the news that a specialized school was interested in sending teachers to train Iara and other potential local instructors. The Mendonça house had also changed. Mr. Jeremias no longer drank so much. He spent more time trying to learn sign language, his thick farmer's fingers forming increasingly precise gestures. Donna Severina had become one of the most dedicated students, practicing every day to be able to talk with her daughter. The room that had always remained empty, the room that had never really been Iara's, was now decorated with drawings, seed necklaces, and small sculptures. A space of her own, a recognition of belonging. On a December afternoon, when the rains finally brought relief from the heat, the village of Cachoeira do Mato witnessed something unprecedented, the first theatrical performance in sign language. In the central square, Iara and a group of children told the story of the encounter between the deaf girl and the old Pataxo. They didn't use spoken words, only hands, facial expressions, and body movements. And yet, everyone understood, because they had learned to listen with their eyes, to speak with gestures, to find meaning in silence. At the end of the performance, Jurassi approached Iara and with his hands formed a new sign. He touched his own heart and then pointed to her, drawing in the air a circular movement that involved all the people present. It was a name in sign language, a name just for her, she who teaches the heart to see. Iara smiled, tears in her eyes. She finally had a name that would last longer than a season. A name that spoke of who she really was. That night, sitting by the river with Jurassi, observing the reflection of the moon in the dark waters, Iara understood that silence had never been her enemy. It had just been the necessary space for her to hear what really mattered, the language of respect, acceptance, belonging. A language that now spread, like waves in the water, touching lives she had never imagined reaching. And in the village of Cachoeira do Mato, where before a deaf girl was seen as a burden, it was now said that there was a special blessing, the ability to listen not only with the ears, but with the eyes, with the hands, with the heart, because Iara had taught everyone that true communication goes far beyond words. It's in the gestures, in the looks, in the authentic presence, in the recognition of the humanity that dwells in each of us, regardless of our differences. If you were moved by Iara and Jurassi's journey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart and make us reflect on the power of true communication. Leave your like and share in the comments. What moment touched you the most in this narrative?